I work for a nanotechnology company. We are building a microscopic nanochip that can reduce sickness by using electromagnetic pulses. We are currently in the beta stages, but have already produced our first chip. The company is owned by some shady businessmen who moved the entire development phase to Indonesia, simply because it was legal to test the chips on live animals. I feel bad seeing the helpless animals locked up all day from the experiments on them, but I've signed a non-disclosure agreement with the company before I got hired. I must dedicate at least 3 years of work to the company for the upfront salary I was paid. I have no choice but to obey the agreement, or I risk over 25 years in jail for breaking the contract, which I already signed before knowing what the job was about. We had been testing the chip on a group of monkeys when one of the monkeys had escaped their holding area and began releasing the rest of the monkeys. One of the lab workers ended up walking in without knowing the monkeys had escaped all their cages and was mauled alive. He didn't stand a chance since he was the main handler of the apes and treated them as lifeless creatures. All we could do was watch through the glass as he shouted helplessly with no one around to assist. Even if someone wanted to help, they wouldn't stand a chance against a dozen angry monkeys that had a hatred for the way they've been treated. A few of the apes were so weak from all the experimenting they endured, they were still sitting in their cages without any energy to crawl out. There was no way to contain the animals, so they had to gas the entire room, euthanizing the entire group of apes. This set us back over 4 months of work and trials, since we were no longer able to examine the results of the now deceased apes. There are certain parts of the cities where the monkeys are considered pests, breaking into the local homes and killing small dogs and cats. They sent out for a request for 12 new monkeys from this area, and within 6 hours, we had a full set of monkeys, contained in cages, all to be used for the nanotechnology that didn't seem to be working the way the company expected. The technology is meant to reduce sickness, but seems to have an after effect of extreme rage and anger, followed by a grave illness. They have been working on this for years and continue to experiment on all living creatures they could find. It was 2 years into the job when I was told I would be put in charge of a new department to oversee the shipments of new species for testing. I dreaded knowing I was in a position with this company where I was in charge of intentionally injuring helpless animals. I used to be an animal lover, so I've tried to drown out the emotions for these years while I test on dozens and dozens of species. I asked the boss if he had any idea what type of new species were being imported, as he stared at me blankly and said, "Remember the non-disclosure agreement? Just make sure you live up to it." He too was silenced and couldn't speak about what we were doing while on the job with other employees. The way he stared at me seemed a bit strange, as I sat thinking for the rest of the day what we were going to be testing on. I was set to begin the new shift, and was sent to a complete new lab in another part of the island. I had to jump on a small airplane and land on a small dirt airstrip that was used by the scientists to enter and exit the lab. We were completely isolated from society. The only way to get to this laboratory was by air or boat, which would take over a day from the main city. We live within these laboratories for the next several years. All I will see is the inside of lab rooms and a small bit of social life with other scientists and guards working at the company. As I walked into the new facility, it didn't look so much like a laboratory. Not only were we on an island, but there was an extra large amount of security before you enter every new part of the building. As I entered the main entrance, I could see a line of doors where the attendant explained to me my door was through Bioroom A. As she clicked open the door and I reached out to open it, it was a long white hallway that looked exactly like some sort of supermax prison complex. It felt like I was in a jail system, as the white hallway was lined with strong metal doors with small windows on each door. There had to have been at least 20 doors in total, as I counted 10 on each side. I glanced around and could see all the rooms had no lights, but I could hear moans coming from behind the doors. I glanced inside the first window, but couldn't see anything as it was too dark. I saw another pair of scientists enter the room from the back end, as they both walked holding handcuffs in their hands. I began to wonder, why would they have handcuffs? Are we testing on humans? They headed towards the first door on the left side as they entered a key code while the door opened automatically. They turned on the light and they both stepped in. I wasn't supposed to interrupt their work, so I walked by attempting to glance inside the room to see what was in there. I couldn't believe my eyes. My heart sank to my stomach as I saw a young man in his mid-20s in a drowsy state of mind. The scientists were putting handcuffs on him as they slowly wheeled him out, as he was so weak they had him sitting in a wheelchair. I couldn't believe we were now testing on actual human beings, and there was nothing I could do about it, or I would be put in jail for the rest of my life. I didn't know what to do. I was going to be forced to do cruel experiments on my own humankind. As I walked through the next set of doors to enter the lab office, I could see my boss sitting there, looking into the security camera. He turned his chair and says, "I see you already found out what we were working on here." As I stood there silently staring at him deeply in the eyes with a sense of anger deep down inside. I wasn't mad at him, since I knew we were both doing our jobs, but I highly regret now ever signing up for this company in the first place. My boss explained that the technology we were testing did not work the way the company intended it to work. It was supposed to reduce sickness, but during the process, it manipulated the human genome, causing an open black hole to the human DNA structure that will accept any type of pathogen, killing the subject within weeks. He explained the mutation of the technology caused it to become airborne, and it had moved into the wild monkey population on the island. It was only a matter of years before it passed it to the human population and wipes out millions within weeks. He explained this is why we are now testing on humans in this facility. He told me all the test subjects were sentenced to death by the local government for crimes they committed. Instead of killing them, they secretly handed them to the laboratories to use them as test subjects. I told him if our government finds out this is what we were working on, we will be sentenced to death ourselves, as he replied, "That's why I told you to obey the non-disclosure agreement. At this point, it's for your own safety." He stood up and said, "Come, I will show you around the facility so you know where everything is at." We walked out his office and entered another large open area room. They had hundreds of people sitting in cages. In this room, all the way from young underage kids up to senior adults. I couldn't believe my eyes. They were all drugged up, so they wouldn't even bother moving. They looked like zombies, all standing around in an open room, staring into nothingness. He told me we have 1 year to work in this facility before the government will demolish it completely. It's been 15 years now since I worked at this Supermax secret lab. Over the years, I did some research on the company and tried to follow the trail to see who was really in charge of the evil organization. To my surprise, it was the actual government who owned the secret laboratories. They couldn't run such an operation in the public eyes, so they had set up an enormous operation with the mafia to open these laboratories and test on live subjects. The company is still in operation today, but I haven't heard anything about them since I ended my job years ago.